a valid statement. I always just say, I just want it to happen. I want whatever is going to keep kids safe to happen.
Sure. And I think that's definitely the right answer. With this situation, I find it troubling that the punishment for this was really there was no sort of punitive push against him to reduce the risk that this might happen again. You know what I mean? Like there was no sort of he really didn't get punished whatsoever. If you think about it, that's an egregious crime. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think it's hard because in the United States we treat this so differently, and he would have been locked up and he would have gotten time for this, and those amount of images would have gotten him in so much trouble. And we do have programs that they go through in prison specifically for these types of offenses. I think Steve had a question, or this way? No, that way.
Yeah, well, I was going to ask Steve a question.
Yeah, go ahead. That's my first one. There we go. Now she figured it out. Yeah. We're doing weird things on camera here. There we go.
What would you say, Steve, is the because thinking about it, when Leah brought it up, I can't come to an answer. What is the solution? Can people who have this propensity to do these sort of things, can they be rehabilitated? Is that something that can be sort of conditioned out of them? I don't know.
I think Leah said perfectly, actually. As a parent myself, my primary consideration is the safety of the children, right? What needs to be done to protect the children? That is the number one priority. It's not the to what's beneficial to the perpetrator. It's not, to anything else but to the children. Can they be rehabilitated? Sometimes. I don't think the propensity probably ever goes away. I think what happens is that people are trained when they go to psychotherapy and they go to these professionals to learn how to not act upon it. And that's my concern. I'm not a thought police. I really, it sounds odd, I don't really care what people think in their head, because that's in their head. That's not something we should really be concerned about. It's the actions they take because of those thoughts, right? That's what we see the consequentialism of, right? Because those are something that has actual effects on people. And so if they can diminish that, then I think that's an effective means of treatment. And I would call that, for all practical purposes, they're not cured by any means, but at least rehabilitated, right? You had mentioned, and Katie, real quick, that in the States here where we're at, there's far more incarcerations for these types of things. People remember the story from Jared, right, from Subway. He got some time. We had a person in our community that got 10 years. And Kyle had asked about signs, things to be aware of and look for. And sometimes there is none. I knew somebody for a very long time. Not a single sign. Didn't talk about anything sleazy. Didn't talk about anything controversial, really. They just did their thing. And come to find out, they got arrested and got 10 years. 1 year doesn't seem like something that would happen in the States. That's not even for a bad misdemeanor around here.
People are saying maybe chemical castration. What are your thoughts about that?
I'm okay with that, but I think, here's my ethical concern with chemical castration is if it's on a voluntary basis or not, right? I mean, I'm okay with chemical castration, but is it something that we should not in other words, is it something we should force upon people? Because then we can become very barbaric in that case. So I have ethical considerations with that. But then again, I have to weigh the pros and cons with the safety of the children, just like, Katie talks about vaccines. What's the safety? What's our concern, right? The safety of the children to get vaccinated, or the rights and autonomy of an individual? I tend to go for society, but a lot of people stand for individual rights, and I affirm a lot of libertarian concepts. But I think as a society, there are arguments to be made that safety and health and welfare have to come first.
Oh, yeah.
Well, and I think what we forget too is that he wasn't a physical offender, but every single one of those images that he looked at was an abuse. Yeah, and and it's, you know, a graphic abuse, and then it's a violation every time someone looks at that image. So then how do you train that out of someone that you might not have thought that you abused this person, but you actually did by looking at this image?
Yeah, I agree with that approach too. Yeah. Okay, Kyle.
I want to say to Leah, like, I don't think that the role that you played in potentially saving people from this, because we don't know to what extent it would have gone if he would have gotten, you know, if he would continue to, you know, get away with it, so to speak. You potentially stopped a you know, a bad situation from getting worse, and I think that you should definitely be commended for like how quickly you took action, because you didn't waste any time you know, wanting to hear his side and give him the opportunity to talk you out of it. You stood your ground, and you did the right thing, and that's a tough thing to do in that situation. So I think you should definitely be commended for how you handled that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I look, the level thing. I haven't looked up what level 4 and level 5 is, and I'm still mulling over in my head if I really want to, but only because went back in the day when we had to do research on the whole Catholic stuff. It was very graphic, and so I do want to warn people, if you look into the stuff. I'm guessing that it's probably something that's nothing that many people have been exposed to before for that level 4 and number 5. I'm assuming, right? Yeah. Because if it's anything like what I had to read for the reports on the whole Catholic thing, that was pretty disturbing.
Yeah, you'd be correct on that.
Okay.
So, oh, sorry, Katie, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, so Leah, I think one of the things that a lot of us forget about, and as a society we get very laser focused on, is the offender and what they've done. But talk to us about what it is like to be connected to the offender so intimately. Like, how did your friends react to this?
Well, she was also a victim too, her and her daughter, because he had uploaded pictures of my friend and her daughter. So she was very supportive for quite a while, but it seemed after a while, when she wanted to move on from it, I was still suffering, and we fell out over that, because I said to her, you know, I brought up some issues with how I needed support, and she basically did not follow through on her promises with what I needed. So I lost that friendship. And when I did the other media on this, which was quite large here in Australia, she absolutely, she went ballistic over it. She turned on me big time. So that's complicated, because that's more to do with who she is as a person. You know, she and her daughter were also victims in it too. So what happens is it reaches every corner of your life. Everybody you know. It's rare to come across people who know how to talk to you about it in a way that is helpful. So you do end up feeling quite alone in it, because when you tell people what's happened, they don't know how to react, because everybody, I think, has a switch in their brain that goes, nah, don't want to go there. And so when you're looking for support and everyone has that switch, you start to take it personally. And it took me quite a long time to realize that I can't take that personally. That's their way of coping. So, you know, I was really, really fortunate to find the right professionals to help me who got it. People, you know, professionals that knew how to deal with trauma and knew a lot about sex offenders. Without that outlet, I would have been totally screwed.
Yeah. You mentioned,
so I have been diagnosed with complex PTSD. So you can draw the cause of that directly to him.
Sure.
So some of it is to do with what happened during the relationship, but that breaking point was that night I found what I found. Something just snapped in me, and I've never been the same again since.
Sure. And nor should you be. I think that's completely understandable. You mentioned a second ago the media. So you were contacted by several media outlets. What was that like in terms of dealing with sharing your story with millions of people, and what was sort of the reaction that you got from people that saw your story?
Okay, so when I did a national newspaper article, that was fantastic. It felt really empowering because I had to wait until he was convicted before I could talk about it, because I was very mindful of not doing anything that would put me in a bad light in case I had to be a witness if he pled not guilty. So I had to keep my mouth shut for the longest time. And this opportunity came up to do the newspaper article, and that was fantastic. Whenever with this stuff online, there is always very positive reactions, but I guess that doesn't translate through to the real world, which is unfortunate. And then I did 60 Minutes here in Australia, and that was very difficult. They were held to account with how they went about the whole thing pretty well, but they did manage to pull a Swiftie on me in doing kind of an interview I wasn't expecting on a different day to the main interview, in which they had an iPad in front of me and showed pictures of us that I'd given them from happy times when we were together. And, you know, at that point, I was 2 years into recovery, and I really hadn't dealt with that aspect of him having happy memories, and then what had happened. It didn't compute very well back then. So they triggered me really bad that day, and I threatened to pull the pin on the whole thing, to be honest. But the overall good that came from that story was, you know, I think it was like 3 or 4 months after that story, I was still getting messages from other ladies who had been through something similar and were not feeling alone anymore. So it was definitely a great thing to do.
You know,
That's excellent.
I Googled your name earlier. Actually, no, I Googled his name, and I found an article on
that can be amusing because if I didn't do the media, if you Googled his name, nothing would have come up.
Right.
I at least have peace of mind that maybe if he meets another woman, she might be smart enough to Google his name.
Yeah. Well, I saw a letter, a blog post, for instance, on Mamma Mia, and it said, "To the woman that turned her husband in, thank you." And I was like,
yeah,
oh.
that was nice.
Yeah, and Mamma Mia is a really large outlet in, it's kind of like a People magazine, I guess, in some ways, or an Entertainment Tonight type of thing.
Do you know, like, I don't want this to I don't want this to come out the wrong way. Are you aware of his whereabouts today, like for safety reasons, not because you're keeping tabs on him, but like for for the possibility of like either retaliation or just so you know, like not to be in the same, however sort of distance from him? Are you able to keep like tabs on him to make sure that he stays, away from you?
I have no idea where he is. I could guess. Okay.
Sure.
I don't feel I'm safe in that regard anymore. I used to. I moved an hour and a half away back to my parents' place, and I live on a farm now. That's where I grew up. And in the early days, I would be laying in my bed, and it's a quiet road. So if there was headlights, I would start